Welcome to Beyond the Chutes is presented by ParaSight Systems. I'm your host, Doug Simcox, and I hope that you are having a great day, staying safe, and enjoying this beautiful fall weather. Today I'm recording in Taylorsville, Kentucky, and we have on the phone the 23-time IPRA world champion, Mr. Shawn Miner. Today we're going to be asking about his childhood, about finding rodeo, his pro rodeo career, and what he is doing today. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Shawn Miner. Shawn, how are you today, sir?
Man, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It sounds like you are on the road. Can you tell our listeners where you are today?
Yes, I am in between Syracuse and Buffalo. I'm headed back from Albany, headed home.
Oh, wow. And where is home, Shawn?
I live down kind of in between Dayton and Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
Camden. So
right off 75 in that area?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, right in there.
And a big run all the way to Albany. How many hours is that from the house?
Well, if I eat my Wheaties the day before,
yeah,
I can usually do it in about 38 hours. I leave my house usually around 5:30 in the morning, and I'll go to Peoria and pick up a load and then have it to Albany. Oh, usually 2 or 3 in the morning, drop it off. Then I'll sleep for a couple, 2 or 3 hours. And then generally I'll be home, 8, 9 o'clock at night. So.
Okay. Are you hauling empty, headed back to the house?
Yep, I'm empty right now.
Okay. So cruising along pretty good then.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
rolling light.
Rolling light. Well, we appreciate you being on the show today. I was thinking as I was preparing for our conversation today, you and I met in the early 2000s, probably 2004, 2005. You were coming up into the Northeast a bit at that point, and I remember when you showed up. So I'm excited about today's conversation. But before we get into all of that, tell us about growing up. Where did you grow up, Shawn?
I grew up in northwest Nebraska in the Sandhills, a little town called Gordon. And where I grew up, I was 25 miles from town, 18 miles to the nearest paved highway. Grew up on about 38,000 acres right there.
38,000 acres. So ranching, running cattle, horses, what were you doing?
Yep. Yeah, it was a cow-calf operation my folks had. And we didn't raise too many horses, but, rode a lot of them. Broke a lot of colts, that kind of thing. But it was a cow-calf operation. We, at one point, I guess I was in my early 20s. I think we were running about 2,300 head of mama cows.
Oh, wow.
And, had 4, I guess we had it was 4 married men working for us and 1 single guy.
Oh, wow. So 5 hands working for you full time.
Yep. We had all different, they lived on different homesteads. And at the time, my dad had a feedlot too, so we had that going on, and then he was partners in 2 different sale barns, and so cattle was our thing,
Mm-hmm. And he was in the feedlot. He was finishing cattle.
Yeah, he would a little bit of everything. He would buy a lot of broken mouth cows, open cows, and put them on full feed. He'd background, some yearlings and stuff. The only thing that I liked about that feedlot is that's where we took all of our bulls and wintered them there all winter, so we didn't have to fix the fence all winter from them damn things fighting all the time.
Oh, okay. And that makes sense. They can be hard on the fences. So when they weren't in the feedlot and wintered there, they were out with the cows.
Yep, pretty much. Yeah,
okay.
we took them up there, and I was like, this is the only thing that I like about that feedlot, because I was used to riding miles, and I grew up where I grew up, and like when I went to school and stuff, I rode horses to school.
Really?
Yep, it was a little one-room schoolhouse about 7 miles straight south of the ranch, and a lot of people don't believe this, but I'd break ponies to ride, just anything that needed miles. The neighbors would bring stuff. My uncles would send stuff, and me and one of the hired man's kids, we'd lope them down there until it got so cold that you couldn't. Of course, about this time of year was kind of when it shut us down, and then we'd drive ourselves. I was 8 or 9 when I started driving a stick shift pickup to school.
Really?
And,
Okay.
Yeah. But so it was, it was wide open country. We didn't know any better.
Yeah.
We'd have them big snowstorms come in, and we never missed school because we knew if we never missed a day of school that we would get out May 5th or right in there somewhere, and then we wouldn't miss any Brandons in the spring. So we made sure that we never missed any school.
For sure. And for our listeners, I want to back up just a little bit. Number one, you're driving at 8 years old. Before that, you're riding horses 7 miles, and 7 miles is what, about a 45-minute ride? Can you do it in 45 minutes?
No. It was. I used to leave the house about 6, probably 6 in the morning.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember for sure. I know it was fairly dark, and it didn't take too. And I guess it was 7 miles if you drove there.
Mm-hmm.
So riding a horse it was a straight shot.
Okay.
Straight south across the hill.
No fences between here and there.
There was a lot of gates and stuff we had to go through. But,
okay.
But I would say it was a good 5.5, probably 6 miles, straight south. But we could make it in an hour and hour and a half, something like that. Long trotting and loping. Sometimes I'd come walking back to the barn or to the house, and I wouldn't have a horse because I got bucked off.
Yeah. Did the horse
my
fight?
mom would,
Go ahead.
Well, the horse would always come home, but my mom would have to run me to school in the pickup.
Okay.
So I wasn't late. Stuff like that.
Okay.
But it was pretty wild. Me and the hired man's kid, his name was Wyatt.
Uh-huh.
We topped the hill because my school sat down in a big valley, and we'd top the hill, and then we'd have a horse race to the bottom. And one time I cut across this other little hill, and he went around it, and I forgot there was a big blowout up there, and I jumped this pony off of it, and she didn't land very good because she went end over end and slid on top of me, and I told Wyatt, I said, you can't tell nobody. I said, we'll get in all kinds of trouble because we was horse racing,
But you got up rough and tumble. You were okay after a spill like that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
She lit on top of me, but it was just a pony, so it wasn't that big a deal. And the sand was real deep, and the ground wasn't froze. I remember the ground wasn't froze yet, so it didn't hurt too bad. It was a learning experience because after that, then we horse raced around that little hill instead of across it.
Not to make the same mistake again. Talk a little bit about the weather for our folks. Northwestern Nebraska. How far were you guys from like the Colorado border?
Oh, you could be in Denver in 5.5 hours.
Oh, okay. So still a bit of a push. But what was the weather like? Blizzards, freezing?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, the wind would blow. The wind blows all the time out there. So, 40-mile-an-hour wind and 8 inches of snow makes it pretty impassable, as far as the roads go. I can remember being snowed in for, a week and a half, sometimes 2 weeks at a time, because we'd have them big storms blow in, and the county, they would, they'd come out in a road grader and a V plow, and they'd plow us out. But the snow, or if the wind didn't quit blowing, it would just blow it right back shut again. And we had, big 4-wheel drive tractors with blades on it and a bucket, and we had roads built to where we could feed our cows, and that was all we was worried about. None of us ever even give it a second thought, really. Nobody cared that the mail wasn't running. We didn't, always took care of the cows and went about our day, pitched ice, and we'd ride a snowmobile to school and, make sure we didn't miss no school. And sometimes we wouldn't take recess and or lunch, and she'd let us out. The old school mom, she'd let us out at 1 sometimes so we could go home and work.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
okay.
But yeah, I mean, there's been many a big blizzards that just had us stocked in for a week or so every time. I can't even name them all. There's been so many just because of the wind. The snow wasn't the deal, but it was always the wind, and it 30 below zero and that kind of fun stuff. Where nothing works, and you just makes you really just want to be a rancher.
Right. And while you're snowed in, right, and can't go to school in, a week and a half or whatever, you're not sitting in the house in front of the fire with your feet up, right?
No, there was no such thing as that. I've been paying taxes since I was 9.
Okay.
So,
okay.
there was no, we learned at a very early age. I would hate to guess how many bucket calves I raised, over the years. I don't know what I'm going to do when I get old and retire and don't have nothing to feed or take care of.
Yeah.
That'll be really weird for me. I'll have to have an old horse or something around so I can feed it every day, because I just won't feel right if I don't.
Get up and do chores. And with 2,300 cows, right? Now, we're not talking the feedlot necessarily, but 2,300 cows. You winter them, you bring them up to the house, to the main lots at that point in the winter?
Well, the only time we'd bring them up very close, we had winter range, and some of them pastures were really, really rough, as far as, big choppy hills and lots of windbreak and a lot of grass, and we didn't start feeding hay, until we absolutely had to. But then, I'd say the middle of February, if we weren't calving heifers, the 1st of February, we'd start bringing everything in, because we'd start calving about the 1st of March. And then we keep everything up close. Yeah. And, and then you live with them 24/7, basically, because when it's, 10 below zero, you got about 15 minutes before that calf's dead.
Right.
And so you got to, you always have a horse saddled 24 hours a day. And as soon as that calf hits the ground, boy, we had a little cart that was made out of hog panel on skis. And you'd grab that calf and set it down in there, and that cow could smell him and watch him, and we just drag him to the barn with a horse, and that cow would follow you right in there. Nine out of 10 times, that's the way it's going to happen. Yeah. And get them in, and just as long as they were out of the wind, and that old cow would, take care of them, and we never had any problems. But it was just it was 24/7. You catch a nap now and then whenever you could. Yeah.
And for our listeners, when you talk about haying, you probably start haying what? Are they haying like right now, the 8th of November?
No, they probably won't start feeding hay. You gotta to have a pretty good snowfall for them to even start before January.
Okay.
Because that pasture, that winter range stuff, they don't use it for only just in the winter. So all summer long, that winter range does nothing but grow, and the grass gets real tall and deep, and so there's, it saves on your hay when. Then once of course you get them in and start calving, then you feed a lot of it.
And what when you're feeding hay, are you feeding smaller bales? You feeding big round bales?
Yeah, big rounds.
Okay.
Feed big round bales, and then like a 30% protein. We call it cake, but it's like cubes. And then ear corn. Okay. And that corn, it holds a lot of heat in it, so you feed that, the cake, and of course the hay out there is Timothy and orchard grass, and then we had a couple of different pivots of alfalfa, and so the feed out there is great anyways, but you give them that little extra protein and stuff, and they stay fat, slick, and can handle them winters, if you keep them fed up.
Yeah. When we were talking about daily chores, once come January, when you're feeding the corn, the hay, the cake, and everything, how long does it take to do your morning chores? Just for our listeners to understand the kind of workload that's here with 2,300 cows.
Well, so every man has every hired man would have their own tractor and feeder and everything, and if they didn't mess around, everybody got started at 7 in the morning, they could be done feeding by noon. That was no problem at all. And then in the afternoon, you can work on whatever you might have tore up or fixed fence or the mound of other stuff that you can do.
Yeah. And where were you getting your feed, your corn, your hay, and that sort of thing?
Well, like the hay, we raised our own, we had meadows up there. There was all self-irrigated meadows and stuff. So we would, in the summertime, that's what we did. We'd put up hay right around, just down there where we were at. We'd put up about 8,000 round bales a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Man. So you're toting a lot of hay in. How far would you have to haul that hay in to get it to where you could work it in the wintertime to feed?
Well, you tried to kind of do that strategically. We had what we called like hay lots. And so you go and you'd have them guys, when we were splitting up hay, we always had 2 guys that were moving hay. And a lot of times, like anything that was close to the winter range, you'd have them hay lots close to wherever you're got all your cows at in the winter range. So you'd move all that stuff there, and that way you didn't have to haul it as far.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And you talked about calving, and you mentioned specifically about calving heifers. And of course, heifers, that's going to be first calf. Tell us about some of the challenges there with these young heifers. Yeah.
Man, it was a lot of work. Because that first time, sometimes they basically lose their mind. I've seen some of them heifers just maul their babies and not claim them and just act stupid. And then there's the other ones that lay down and have them on their own and no problems at all. But mostly your biggest fear is them not taking care of them. once they get them on the ground. So taking care of them, having them take care of their own calf, and having the right bull on them, where you didn't have to pull 90% of them.
Yeah,
that was the key.
Okay.
To way less workload as far as a first calf heifer goes.
All right, so let me back up here. And I was going to ask this question: if you guys you ran your heifers separate, it sounds like, than your stock cows.
Yes, yeah. So all the heifers, the first calf heifers, would be all in a whole different pasture.
Okay.
And generally, what we would do is we would AI about 250 head.
Really?
And so, when they would start calving, they were squirting them out now. Getting with it.
So smaller calves is what you were looking for these heifers.
Well, yeah, you're wanting a low birth weight bull for sure.
Okay.
And that way you're not pulling 30 head of calves a day.
Yeah.
And scratching your head going, man, why'd I go with this bigger birth weight bull? So my dad was pretty. He was a cow man, so he was pretty savvy on that stuff, and we never really had too much problem. The only time that I can ever remember we having big problems with first calf heifers was when he bought them. He would buy 30, 40, 50 head or whatever.
That's when they were already bred? Okay.
Yeah, that were already bred, and that's when we would run into problems.
Okay.
Now, when we did it on our own, he was a hell of a cow man.
Yeah.
And he knew about the birth weights and easy calving bulls and stuff like that. And that's just, man, that just makes for longevity.
Yeah.
Of your help, because it ain't fun at all to have to pull every one of them. It just makes for a lot of work and no sleep, and then everybody's grouchy, and it just
hard on
makes
attitudes.
It a lot easier. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Hard on attitudes. That's for sure.
And for our listeners, pulling calves means to assist the heifer because she can't push. Maybe that calf's a bit bigger, bigger than the canal is meant to be at that point. So you will pull. You use come along or reach in for sure. No.
Well, very, very rarely. We had a calf puller.
Okay.
But if you don't know what you're doing with them calf pullers, man, you can break legs and everything else with them.
Yeah.
What we used was calving chains. We'd put 2 calving chains, one on each foot.
Okay.
Depending on whether he was, backwards or frontwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we would put a back cinch around us.
Yeah.
We'd step in it, and then we would use them, just buckle it into the chains.
Mm-hmm.
And we would use our own weight to help pull them. And we would wait, you could rear back on it, just kind of rest there. And then you'd wait for her to contract and push.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made it so much better than using them calf pullers. Them pullers, you can put way too much tension on them and break legs and everything else. So we tried to steer clear of it. And generally, if we couldn't pull one, with a cinch around us, then it was probably a C-section.
I see. And would you call the vet at that point for a C-section?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we would. We got to where, back in the day, they used to roll them heifers over on their back,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they would cut them right out the bottom of their belly. Mm-hmm. And then of course, the medicine and everything evolved more to where they would do it with the heifer standing up and just cut it right out the side.
Oh, wow.
So that got to be, my dad could cut them out of their belly, mm-hmm. but once we got to where, that's cutting through a lot of layers and a lot of things like that, to where we would just, we just call the vet and have him come down and or run them to town, either or.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
Weather permitting.
I was going to say, in the middle of all this, you're probably stripped down to get those chains on.
Yep.
And it's March, it's February, so cold, winds blowing, snowing, didn't matter. Yeah.
We had everything around the house.
Okay.
Around the barns, and we had cabin sheds and like a milk cow stanchion.
Mm-hmm.
We had a little cabin barn where you could run them in and squeeze them in there, and they'd run their head through there and just snap their head in a head catch, and then you got them.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we were doing it out in the pasture or anything like that. It was, because it's just too damn cold for that most of the time. When the wind's blowing and stuff, you'd be horseback, getting them in.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when, probably I'd say 5 out of 10, you got to rope them and drag them to the barn anyway. So, because they don't want to, they're just not in a complying mood.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, we'd always do it in there, and then we had some that continuous heat water, and water heaters, and so we had warm water and stuff like that once we got them in the barn and different things like that. So it wasn't like we were doing it out in the middle of nowhere or anything like that. It had a setup where it worked pretty good.
Okay. And working the ranch, 38,000 acres, 2,300 cows. I mean, how many overnight trips were they? You'd be out checking cows? You did it on horseback?
No, we had spotlights and a pickup.
Okay.
And about it, when you're cabin heavy, every 2 hours, you better be out there checking them.
Really? Okay.
So, yeah, every 2 hours. And then, you'd have 3 or 4 started in the middle of the night. So you might as well just pull over there to the barn and take a little nap in the pickup and wait on them. And, it's way better than going clear back to the house and taking all your clothes off and laying down for 45 minutes. It just doesn't make any sense, And
don't remember, you got to get up and get to school the next day, right?
Yeah, well, when I was in school, I wasn't in on, the overnight deals and stuff. Okay. I kind of bounced forward to where I was taking care of, my own herd of cows that I had that, and that's just how we did it, Yeah. Whether I was in school or not, that's how it was done.
I see. And then let's go to warmer weather. Let's go to a little bit more comfortable working. Wind's always blowing. I get that. But working the ranch. Now we're going to talk a little bit about branding. We're going to talk a little bit about riding the herds, checking fences, all on horseback, of course, for that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'd start branding the last weekend in April. And we would brand, probably right around 40,000 head through about the second week of June. That's helping all the neighbors. The neighbors help each other, and we rope and drag them to the fire. Big crews. We would do we used to help our neighbors to the south of us. The ranch was called the U-Cross Ranch, and we would brand 1,300 head and be done by noon. Be sitting at the house eating lunch by noon.
1,300 head in the morning, Shawn?
Yep.
Oh my goodness! How many cowboys? How many hands are working horses and catching calves and dragging calves? And
it would be 30 to 40 guys on horses. Man. And generally, if you got 6 or 8 sets of wrestlers, you're going to have four guys roping. You're going to have 3 or 4 guys branding. You're going to have 2 guys on each side of the fire cutting. Depending on who it was, they'd dehorn them. Vaccinate. You'd have a vaccinator on each side of the fire. You know, it's, you know, once you got in that rhythm, man, we'd roll through them. It didn't take very long.
And
you
the
know,
fire, you're heating up the branding irons in the fire?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it was a Brandon stove. So it was run off of, it was run off of propane.
Oh.
It's kind of a round tube, basically, where the fire, like a weed burner, you know,
Yep.
a weed burner would be on both ends of it, blowing heat on each, you know, towards each other, and the Brandon irons would just set in there. And it was, you know, set up to where, you know, you didn't have to bend over, and it wasn't down in the dirt, you know, or anything like that. And so we called them Brandon stove. And it, you know, it would keep 12, 15 Brandon irons red hot, you know. Wow. So them guys would take off across there, and you could brand, you know, 2 or 3 calves sometimes, depending on how hot your iron was, with the same iron.
Okay.
So literally, you know, it didn't take not even a full minute per calf.
Really? To cut, dehorn. Yep.
Yep. Depending on, like, the U-Cross was about the only guy that had to use, you know, to dehorn them, because he had some red Simmentals and stuff that had some horns and things like that. But even he was so fast with those spoons that that, man, he'd dehorn them things, and I mean, literally no time at all.
Yeah. And what were your jobs? So go back to when you're the youngest, right? When you were just starting to do all this. Yeah.
You start wrestling calves. That's just where you start.
Okay.
And then by the time I was 10 years old, I was fairly good with a rope. So they put me to roping. Okay. And dragging them to the fire and that kind of thing. I did it all over the years. You know, I branded and cut calves and all that stuff. But we got to where, you know, you go to them smaller Brandons, and they were getting to where they were running out of cowboys. They always had plenty of help, but nobody that could rope that good. So I was always on a horse, you know, 95% of the time, and roping and dragging them to the fire.
Mm-hmm. And was that the job to have?
Oh, yeah. For me, it was. I mean, because I'd always bring 2 horses, and you know, generally it was a colt, and you know, you bring a colt, you drag 100 head to the fire on him, and then you use one of your older horses to finish it off, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as long as you know, you would think that it was easier, but when the wind's blowing 40 mile an hour, that tends to mess with your rope, and your arm gets tired from trying to swing it, and, you know, fighting the wind and stuff. But yeah, that's probably the spot to be in, I would say, you know, as far as the least amount of walking that you got to do. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I miss that. I miss branding in the spring. Boy, really? we used to brand a ton of them. Yeah. Every spring.
And just a big social event. I mean, right? I mean, 40 people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was always a lot of people, and then you go back to wherever you know, whoever's place it was, and it was a big social gathering. You know, the women would put a spread out there, you know, to feed an army, and you know, everybody eat, have a few beers, and you know, a lot of BS going on. Yeah. And and it was you know, it was always a good time. You know, I really miss that kind of work for sure.
Now, is the ranch still going?
Oh yeah. My dad. Now the very place that I grew up on, the Minor Hull Ranch, was actually inherited. My great aunt inherited it from my great grandfather.
Okay.
And my dad leased it for a lot of years. Because at the time, she didn't want to sell it and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
She lived in Lincoln, and I don't actually ever remember, maybe once in my entire life, ever seeing her at the place.
Okay.
But anyway, so I don't know how many years ago it was. Probably 12 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
guessing.
Mm-hmm.
10, 12 years ago, something like that. She decided to sell it. And of course, she wanted, a lot for it, because it was just, that place alone was 18,000 acres.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, I don't even remember. It seemed like it was way up in the millions.
Yeah.
And it just, it didn't pencil out to where it would work for my dad.
Right.
So, but in all them years, he had bought land that butted up to it on the south side, the east side, and the north side of that ranch, and that's how we ended up with all that land. He had bought those smaller places that surrounded it, and so he's still, I would guess, he's probably still running, I don't know, 500-600 head of cows.
Okay.
On them smaller places to the south and to the east.
Okay.
So.
Okay. But he's not on the main ranch anymore? That's been sold?
Yep, that's been sold. There's a guy from, a guy that apparently had a bunch of car dealerships from North Carolina. He come out and rang the bell.
Yeah.
So to speak, when he paid all that money for it. But
okay.
Yeah. So that's where it's at now.
And how long was it? It's Minor Hall Ranch. How long was it in the family? Do you remember who started this ranch? Yeah.
Well, my great grandfather bought that from the Hulls.
Okay.
And that was back when, before everybody sold calves right off the cow. Back then, everybody backgrounded their own calves, kept them until yearlings, and sold them the next fall. They wouldn't sell them right at weaned. They would sell them in a year.
Mm-hmm.
They'd keep all them yearlings. So my great grandfather bought that place just to run yearlings on. And so this is another kind of wild story that most people just look at me and scratch their head and go, they can't believe this. But when I was 13 years old, the place that my uncle has is about 56 miles straight south.
Okay.
So the way the crow flies is 56 miles straight south of us. There was about 45 of us, I think, that took off from my uncle's place with 1,500 head of yearlings, and we trailed them all the way to where I grew up. The whole place took us 3 days.
3 days to move 1,500 head, 45 miles.
Yep.
Wow.
And we never. I mean, we cut across the neighbors, and my dad had a 6 abreast workhorses and a chuck wagon.
Okay, I was going to ask.
And he followed along. He had a big wall tent. We had a couple teepees. I can't remember. I don't know. But there was, enough of us that my dad would cook us breakfast at 4 a.m, and then we wouldn't stop again until about 4 p.m.
Okay.
So we'd get them yearlings bedded down and kind of watch them before it got dark on us, and then he'd cook us supper, and it was something else. I got some pictures of it. Some people that flew over with their super cubs and took pictures, and we had them yearlings. They were strung out for 3 and 4 miles at a time.
Wow.
All strung out.
Yeah.
Cowboys everywhere riding them, and me and my Uncle Joe and Clark Jerry, we were in the front. We were kicking cattle out of the way on the neighbors and stuff.
Okay.
And I think we got to have more fun than everybody else did because we did a lot of roping and we had a lot of fun kicking cattle out of the way. But yeah, it was an experience for sure. I think I got bucked off 6 or 8 times in 3 days there.
Did you really?
Yeah, my Uncle Ed had sent me a pony to ride for his son. I think his son was probably, my cousin would have been 3 or 4 years old at the time, and that little paint pony, he kind of wanted to buck more than he wanted to ride, and them guys got me bucked off, I don't know, 6, 7 times at least. I think I'm pretty sure I was 13 years old when we went on that deal.
Okay. And that's like an episode right out of the Cowboys, right? John Wayne and 13 years of age. My goodness. And the fact that you got to be in the front and not in the back, right? With drag.
Yes. Yeah. On the drag, man, I used to hate eating dust all the time back there on the drag. But I remember when I was a little kid, they'd always put me on a really broke horse that would, knew more about cows than I ever did. And half the time I'd be falling asleep and everything else. And that old, whatever I was riding, they would just back and forth, keeping everything up, kind of up in a bunch. They do it on their own, you know.
Yeah.
But, it was, back then it was a lot funner to be out in front, kicking cattle out of the way and roping and have a few nips off the bottle with the big guys and we got to grow up a lot faster than most people did, because my dad always told me, he said, if you work like a man, you can play like a man. So we made sure that we worked hard.
Okay. So let me back up. 18,000 acres. Your great-grandfather bought it to run yearlings on. Was he already up in that area? And actually, I want to go back a little bit further than that. What's the first minor relative that showed up in the Sandhills of Nebraska? Who was it?
That would be my great-grandfather.
Okay.
And his uncle. Okay. Or not his uncle. My great-grandfather and his brother. Joe. Yep. They come from Louisiana. Seems like there was my great-grandfather, Joe, and a sister that stayed in Nebraska, and the rest of them went to Alberta.
Really? Okay.
Yep. They're all big cattle ranchers in Alberta. Yep.
Wow.
So at one time, my great-grandfather, Harry, I would say he owned 1% of Nebraska at one time.
Okay.
Because there is some great big ranches and stuff around there that, ended up and that kind of thing. And they're still big corporations to this day.
What, were they working cattle? Were they farmers coming in from Louisiana?
You know what? I don't know that.
Okay.
I just know that if anybody has the MINOR name,
okay,
my grandfather told me that we're related.
You're related. Okay.
Yep. And as all I know is that they come up, from Louisiana and spread out Washington and Alberta and out in there. And he said, if anybody has the MINOR name, we're related somehow.
Wow. Okay. All right. So up in the northwest up there. So 13 years old, pushing cattle. Was that the only time you were able to make a move like that, living the true cowboy overnight way? No, because that's all we did. Mm-hmm. We didn't do anything with cattle that wasn't on a horse. Okay. Okay.
We moved cows all over the place. At one time, it was 14 miles from the north end of the ranch to the south end. So we got plenty of, moving cows and trailing them and doctoring hoof rot and that kind of thing. We, rode a lot of miles.
Wow. Okay. So how in the midst of all this did you find rodeo, Shawn?
Well, oddly enough, my dad rode saddle broncs.
He did. Okay.
Yep. And I'll never forget it. I was 5 years old. I was in the back side of the barn, and we had a bucket calf in there that we was feeding him, having to bottle feed him twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
And they put a rope around him and threw me up on him, and he took off and bucked me off and threw me into the fence, and I had a wart on my pointer finger from me playing with frogs or whatever. That's what I was told anyway. And it ripped that wart off. Oh, geez. And it bled. I mean, it bled. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And I was like, man, this is what I want to do.
Really?
I was scarred for life. and so anytime, anything that was wild and I can remember getting bucked off quite a few times. My dad bought me a black horse for my 5th birthday, and the hired men told him, don't let that kid ride him. They said he is not ready for that kid because he was a young horse,
Yeah.
And I can remember getting drilled right outside the barn. I don't know how many times when I was 5 and 6 years old. And just thinking, well, when you get your air and put balling or whatever, then you thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then once I got, I was probably, I know one time I asked if I could go to the 4-H show. My dad looked at me and he's like, well, he said, he took a saying from some friends of mine, but he said, around here, he said, we ride them and slide them, not feed them and lead them.
Ride them and slide them. I like that.
Yeah, we ride them and slide them. We don't feed them and lead them. But anyways, I remember he took me to the 4-H show. I was probably 5, 6 years old, and I did good in the walk and I did good in the trot. And then when they asked to lope or canter or whatever they call it, we call it loping. I was just lapping everybody, just making laps around there. I thought it was horse racing. I didn't know no better. And needless to say, that was my one and only 4-H show that I ever went to in my entire life. I told Dad, that is dumb. I said, I don't understand none of that crap. I said, we ain't chasing cows or nothing. Yeah. And so that was the extent of my 4-H career. But so then, after that, I think I was 8 or 9 years old, and my dad ended up being partners with Stan McKillop in a rodeo company in Nebraska there, S&J Rodeo. And Stan McKillop is actually the guy that put together and started the Old Timers Association.
Oh, okay.
Yep, back in the day. So, then of course I was, one of them rodeo brats, and there's nothing tougher than a rodeo brat, because every person in the whole country teases you, and they're a different breed of kid. I don't care what anybody says,
Yeah.
And so there it was. I was just scarred. They were letting me get on steers and whatever. I remember they had a big donkey that no one could ever get rode, because he'd go out there and he'd suck back and whatever they had on him, he would skin it off of them and throw he'd shuck a rigging or shuck a saddle or whatever, it'd go right over his head. And I got on him, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, and with a bareback rigging, I think I was 11 or 12, and finally I put a britching on him where my rigging wouldn't slide over his head, and I finally got him rode. I was the only guy that ever get him rode, and I thought I just conquered King Kong, And So yeah, then after that, I was ate up with it, and
So,
that's basically how I got my start.
okay, so let me back up a little bit. You guys are working crazy. You're working lots of long hours. So we're talking summertime, and it slows down in summertime for you?
Well, no, not really.
No.
Because, in the summertime, we got to put up all the hay.
Right. So you get
So,
okay. And
yeah,
I guess where I'm going, Shawn, your dad's running this crazy large ranch, and he decides he wants to get in on partnership on S&J Rodeo.
yeah.
So how far was it? How far was it for you to travel to some of these places you're describing?
Well, it was 25 miles to our hometown.
Right. Right.
But Stan McKillop was from Mullen, Nebraska, and he was part owners. Well, actually, he owned the hotel in Hyannis, which is the next town south of us, about, I don't know, 59 miles or something. So, and we had, had rodeos in Hyannis, had rodeos in Gordon and Mullen and all over the state, really, in Nebraska.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, for us, even today, I look at stuff and I'm like, wow, it ain't but 6 hours over there.
Right.
It ain't that far.
Right.
And, most people go, oh my God, it's 6 hours,
Yeah.
And we just, even ever since I was a little kid, I was, it was just, well, it's only, 6 hours, that ain't no big deal.
Yeah.
So, it's all in how you're raised and how you look at stuff,
You bet, for sure. And at this time, you're riding steers. You got on this big donkey. Are you also roping?
Oh yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I didn't. I never really got into roping competitively. I made the high school finals in the team roping, in the heeling because I'm left-handed.
Okay.
But it just wasn't it. It wasn't my forte because I roped all the time on the ranch.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, I wasn't mounted quite good enough probably to be doing what to be competitive. The horse that I made the high school finals on, he bucked me off harder than any bucking horse ever has in my entire life. And I had won the bareback riding, I'd won the bronc riding, and I was in the slack in the bull riding that morning and 1/3 in the bull riding. And then I come out in the team roping, and I mean, get slammed.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, everybody thought that was the funniest thing that they'd ever seen in their entire life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which it was. It was good watching.
Yeah.
And I'd pay to watch something like that today.
Right.
And so it was. I was never really worried about. It wasn't that big of a deal to me.
Yeah.
I just nothing. I didn't eat it and sleep it and drink it and like I did bucking horses. That was where it was at. I was ate up with that, and I didn't care about nothing else. And
yeah.
And it was just one of them deals where it wasn't that big a deal to me.
So high school rodeo was really the first. I know he did some pickup rodeos and that sort of thing prior to that, but high school was really kind of the main structured rodeo you got involved with. And were you involved as a freshman?
No, I actually Little Britches rodeo.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I don't know how old I would have been in '89, but that was when I won my first saddle at a Goodland, Kansas, at a Little Britches rodeo. I rode junior bulls and junior barebacks, and then the guy I traveled with, Chad Miller, his mom and dad hauled us around to most of them, and he was a roping fool, and me and him were partners in the ribbon roping. Mm-hmm. I could run like a scared antelope, so So he was a good roper, and me and him were we were runner-up world champions in the junior division in the ribbon roping. So it's that worked out good for both of us.
Okay. So you got introduced to bull riding there in the Little Britches, and barebacks. When did you get introduced to saddle broncs then?
Well, they wouldn't let me get on any saddle broncs until I was big enough to fit in a saddle. I think I had to be a freshman.
Okay.
So 14, 15 years old. Before they'd let me in. And I guarantee I got on 100 head before I even made it 4 jumps, I think, probably.
Really? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I would say at least that many. I don't know. I was terrible at it. I'm like, I can ride them in a stock saddle, but this bronc saddle thing is crazy.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't even remember. But I know that they wouldn't let me get on any because I was so little.
You're so small. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I can remember getting hung up in Fort Collins, Colorado, to a bareback horse called Snake Eyes, and the pickup man rode in there, and I was hung up to him, and the pickup man rode in there and just picked me up and sat me back in the middle of him because I was 2 foot from the ground.
Okay.
Like I was just hanging there in midair. You know, it wasn't like I was dragging around or anything.
Yeah.
And so, you know, by the time I was 14 or 15, I think I grew enough where they stuck me in a saddle.
Okay.
And let me get after it.
Okay. And then did you qualify? Let me finish up the Little Britches Rodeo. I know in Goodland, Kansas. Was that the National Little Britches Rodeo?
No. The Little Britches finals was in Colorado Springs.
Oh.
At Pikes Peak. Yeah. Oh. And I made the finals. Oh geez. I don't know, 4 or 5 times at least.
Okay.
And the bareback riding and the bull riding, and then by the time and the ribbon roping, and then by the time I got into the senior division, well, then I was in high school rodeos and going to amateur rodeos and stuff like that. I just kind of basically leap past the Little Britches stuff and kind of quit going to them. But
and did you win any titles other than the ribbon roping in the Little Britches?
No, I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if I was runner up in the junior bareback riding or not. I can't remember for sure.
Yeah.
But I won an all-around saddle once, and won tons and tons of buckles and buckets and feed pans and hats and all kinds of crap. So it did well, but I don't think I didn't win any titles in the Little Britches. I don't think.
Okay. And then high school rodeo. So now bareback, saddle broncs, bulls. Pretty good bull rider. Did you enjoy bull riding, Shawn?
No, I absolutely hated it. I couldn't get off of them damn things. Every time I would get to the whistle or get bucked off, I'd get stepped on or hooked or something. And I'm like, man, these things are, well, it didn't help that I was, you about couldn't get me out of the portage on right before the bull riding anyway, because I was scared.
Okay.
But I rode them pretty good because I was so scared, I think. I was scared to hit the ground because every time I did, something would happen. I'd get hurt somehow. And I think when I was a junior in high school was the last year. I made the finals, the state finals and stuff. And I made it in the team roping, barebacks, saddle broncs, and the bull riding. And Corco used to put on our finals, and he had brought a bunch of young bulls, and of course I was extra scared of them because they were snorty, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna be done with this bull riding deal. And I hung it up, and I never got on another bull until I was in college.
Really? Okay, so junior in high school, you said enough of this.
Yep. I'd had enough of it. I didn't like it.
Yeah. No, I understand. But still team roping, barebacks, and saddle broncs at that point. And then, so you rode all 4 years. Did you get to the finals? Tell us what you remember. I know you got to the finals. You did that in the team roping as a healer. Tell us about some of your finals, National High School Rodeo Association finals memory.
Yeah. I think my junior year seems like would have been no. I'm trying to think here.
Mm-hmm.
I think I won state in the bareback riding my sophomore year. I ended up being a state champion then.
Mm-hmm.
And then my junior year, I won the bareback riding again. Mm-hmm. And then I think when I was a senior, I won the barebacks and the saddle broncs.
Okay.
Didn't, you know, I rodeoed with guys like Todd Soon and Jeff Johnston and some of them guys that were bad cats back then, mm-hmm. as far as the timed eventers go, you know. So I wasn't dedicated to it enough to be able to put the time in, I think, to really play with them guys.
Okay.
You know, so then again, you know, I was so into riding bucking horses that I made the state finals, you know, I don't know, 2 or 3 years there, mm-hmm. In the team roping, but you know, that was just to get some more points, basically.
And put you in that all around, or help you in the all around race, I should say.
Yeah, help me in the all around, yeah.
Okay.
And then again, you know, Randy Soon and Todd Soon and all them Johnston boys and stuff that I grew up with, you know, they did every time of event and they cut.
Okay.
So as far as trying to beat them guys in the all around that wasn't going to happen either, you know.
Right.
But yeah, it was pretty good. I think I won four high school state championships.
Okay, which qualified you for the finals. Were you able to go to the finals then?
Yeah. I went to Shawnee my first year, I guess. Didn't win any national titles. Won around. I went around just about every time I went. And then something would happen, you know, I would get on a very good horse for my second one or my first one or whatever. But always, you know, had luck there. I'd win around or so and in the bareback riding. Then I went 2-3 years, I guess, to Gillette.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And, you know, same thing there. I'd get on one good one and one horse that shouldn't have been there, you know, kind of a deal. This rodeo stuff, you know.
Right.
But yeah, that was about it. And then we got recruited for the big college.
What college was that? You mentioned that.
My first 2 years, I went to WTC, which was in Snyder, Texas.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And yeah. You can imagine the old snowdrift king from Nebraska. Never been anywhere in my entire life.
Yeah.
Go to blast into Texas. You know, I thought, holy crap, this is a whole different world down here in the desert.
So a couple things, weather beside, and I get that, or weather aside, I should say. What dads think about you leaving? I mean, he's losing a good hand. What effect that have on the ranch?
Oh, it didn't really affect it much. You know, he knew that you know, he kind of helped create a monster, so to speak, as far as riding bucking horses, and so he, you know, he didn't have a lot to say about as far as staying home and taking care of the ranch, and you know, that came later in years.
Okay.
You know.
Okay.
But college and that kind of stuff, he didn't say much. He was whatever.
So 2 years on the rodeo team at WTC.
Yep.
What events were you working there?
I just worked bareback riding and bronc riding. That was it.
Okay, barebacks and saddle broncs. And tell us a little bit about a lot of travel. How did that all work with with the classes and everything?
Yeah, it was pretty simple. I went to get a welding degree. So class was from 7 in the morning until noon. And then I had an hour. Of course, the first thing I did was found a job. And then I would go from there. I'd eat lunch, and then I'd go out and I worked it was a place called Babcock Slick Wireline, and it was a big welding shop, and they had oil field stuff, and I went, and then I'd weld all afternoon for them guys, and then go to practice. We'd ride bucking horses and bulls every other day, I guess, during the season.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually year round down there, because it did snow once, and it was about a skiff, and everybody thought that the world was ending, and of course we laughed about it, and walked around in our t-shirts because it was 58 degrees by noon.
So
but,
you had a rodeo coach in college. Who was your rodeo coach at WTC?
Well, Bob Doty, he recruited us, and then in the midst of that summer, somehow or another, he took a job in Stephenville, at Tarleton, and I knew my mind was going to go blank. But anyways, we had a first year guy come in there, and we were pretty hard on him.
Yeah,
guarantee you, we were pretty hard on him. We little wild ranch kids, and it was me and Davey Shields and Cleve Schmidt, and a bunch of NFR guys that, of course, none of us had made the NFR or anything like that back then, but we thought we were pretty wild, and we were.
Yeah.
We pushed the limits on a lot of things.
So Davey Shields and Cleve Schmidt, they were both bareback riders?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And what did having a coach, hanging out with Davey Shields and Cleve Schmidt, what effect did that have on your riding?
It just all that did was made me ride better.
Okay.
When you and I'm a firm believer, you're only as good as your competition. And so back then, especially, when we were I didn't buy my PRCA permit until I was a sophomore in college, but I felt like I could, in that year of riding against them guys and with them guys and just being with them, made me think in my head that I could ride with anyone.
Okay. Okay.
So, I bought my permit, and of course I filled it in one rodeo, one Killdeer, North Dakota. But it made me a better competitor, and it made me stronger mentally right off the bat. Then again, it's most of it is because you're only as good as your competition, and if you want to be the best, you have to be able to beat the best. And so that was my mindset, as far as that goes, and we college rodeo together, and then we went to lots and lots of PRCA rodeos. Me and Davey Shields, we were roommates for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Roommates in Snyder for 2 years. And then he took a year off, and that was the first year he made the NFR in 97. And then he come back to Weatherford. By that time, I'd moved on to Weatherford, Oklahoma, to Southwestern Oklahoma State. And then we were roommates again. So, just being with guys like them with a good attitude, It just makes you a better person, along with a better competitor.
Okay.
You know, it's the power of positive thinking. You know, you got to be able to believe in yourself before anybody else is going to.
Yeah, yeah. And we talk a lot about that on here, the you know, the mental game of rodeo. You know, and I'm gonna ask you, you know, I hear, you know, mental, you know, rodeo's 90% mental, right? Or mind. What's your estimate of that? Of course you gotta have skill, don't get me wrong.
Right. I always thought it was 80-20.
80-20?
Yeah, you know, for some, probably more, because there were so many guys. I've seen so many guys over the years that couldn't ride past their head. They couldn't fight their own, you know, they couldn't fight their own battles and get past it. And so, but for me, it was, you know, it was probably 80-20.
80,
Yeah, you know,
80.
80% mental and 20% just heart and try.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. And you were able to, when you say they couldn't ride past their own head, was that quieting yourself when you crawled in to where you were just completely focused on what you were doing? Okay.
That's taken pressure and turning it into something positive, like adrenaline and drive, and, you know, just being focused.
Yeah. And
where, you know, there was guys, I got so many friends, you know, South Dakota, Nebraska, Wyoming, Montana, that every rodeo we'd go to, they'd be like, "Hey, come sit in my saddle, see what you think."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "You were just 85 points last night. What's wrong with your saddle?" "I don't know. It just doesn't feel right." Well, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right.
You know, once I got my saddle feeling good, I never touched it.
Okay.
Ever. I didn't care if I got on, you know, Moby Dick one day and then the next day you got on a mouse. I never touched it.
Okay.
And it was stuff like that, you know. Same thing with riggins and you know, spurs and all these spurs don't feel right. Blah 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 blah. Well, you're just fighting your own head, you know.
Right. So you talk about the travels, and I'm going to go back when you were a sophomore in college at WTC. You said you filled your permit in Killdeer, North Dakota.
Yep.
How far afield were you guys going? My goodness. How many hours for our listeners is it from West Texas to Killdeer, North Dakota, would you say?
Well, actually, I was living, it was the summer of well, let's see, what year would that have been? Would have been the summer of 96.
Okay.
So I stayed in Texas summer of 95 because that guy begged me to stay down there and weld all summer.
Okay.
So I did. I stayed down there. But anyways, the next summer, my dad said, "You need to get your butt home and help put up hay."
Yeah.
I said, "All right, no problem." So I was actually in Nebraska, and from Nebraska to Killdeer, North Dakota is probably 8 hours, something like that. And then in the process, he sent me to Glendive, Montana to pick up a gas truck for the hayfield. And so I went over there and I picked up this old 1970s gas truck, you know, one of them 2-ton trucks with a big fuel tank on it.
Yeah.
And I had to cut through and sneak around Rapid City, South Dakota, and cut down through the res, and I think the plates had expired 10 years prior to that, and you know, but I drove that gas truck home from Glendive, Montana when I went to Killdeer, and I got home with it, and he said, "How'd the truck run?" I said, it was good. I said, "It was a good thing I won that rodeo." I said, "I wouldn't have had enough money to get home. It was such a gas hog." He goes, "Oh, you won the rodeo?" I said, "Yeah, filled my permit." And he's like, "Just right.
Okay.
Let's go to work."
Okay.
You know, so
So that's man, I just am thinking about all the miles and all the places you've been already at by the time you're a sophomore in college. Pretty crazy. So, and to your point earlier, 6 hours, that's not much. We could,
No,
yeah,
no,
we could do that pretty
no.
easy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Isn't
I
that
know.
crazy?
Like our freshman year in college and sophomore year, geez, Alpine, Texas was one of our college rodeos, and I think it was 8 hours from Snyder.
Yeah.
It was way down there, and well, it was far enough that we all rode on Friday, and then or no, we all rode on Thursday, and then Friday morning, like 10 or 15 of us all loaded up in a couple pickups, and we drove to Mexico to the border,
mm-hmm.
and we stopped and parked on the American side.
Yeah.
And then we walked down this trail. There's a Mexican guy standing there, and he was pointing down this trail. He was just pointing. And so we walked down this trail, and we got down there, and there's two Mexicans sitting there in a rowboat. We give them all $1 a piece to row us across the Rio Grande.
Okay. Into
and
Mexico.
And then they pointed.
Yeah.
Yeah. They rowed us. They took us across the Rio Grande in a rowboat. And they kept pointing. They pointed at this big oak tree. You could see the top of the tree, but you had to walk up a little hill and then back down in the bottom of the tree. There was about 25 burros all tied up there. And they were pointing at us to go to the tree, go to the tree. And so we went to the tree, and then all of us jumped on these burros and rode them about a mile to a little town called Boquillas. And there was no electricity. It was, there was little shops and a bar and, a couple bars and a restaurant and stuff. But it was, like the 1800s just about.
Okay.
And we rode these burros. We raced all these burros into town and went and had a few cervezas and stuff like that. And it was a pretty wild time. I got lucky enough that I drawed a pretty young burro. And I rode him in that bar, and it didn't take but about 3 minutes, and that barmaid come at us with one of them big old bristle brooms, and whacked the snot out of me and that donkey, and we got the hell out of that bar. I know that.
Rode the donkey into the bar.
Yeah,
wow.
I rode him into the bar, and there was one horse in that whole town. Everything else was donkeys and burros and some buddies of mine, Colt Dowdy and Kent Crouch. I think it was Kent Crouch. I can't remember. Anyways, they broke into this pen and caught this horse, and they took off with him. They jumped this little fence. They were riding him double, and he had never been rode double, I don't think. And they had a runaway all the way down to the river. And of course, we're all kayaking our donkeys, trying to get down there to watch it. And mine was young enough that mine would actually lope. Everybody else's, they were trotting, and so I got down there kind of first, and they were hooping and hollering and riding this. I'll never forget it. He was a bay horse, and they take off and they get down into the river and they go splash, splash, splash.
Yeah,
and then they all three of them just disappear. They fell in that deep channel in the Rio Grande.
Oh wow!
And Kent he ends up on the American side, and Colt Dowdy he ends up on the Mexican side, and the horse gets back on his own and takes off back up to the little town there. And I thought that we were all dead. I was pretty sure we were going to get killed over that deal. I was like, you can't steal horses in Mexico. It just doesn't work very good.
No.
You guys are idiots. So needless to say, we got rowed back across to the American side, and we got the hell out of there as quick as we could. I know that. But it was something else, to see that. I tell people about it, and they're like, no way. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Sounds like an adventure right out of the Cormac McCarthy books. Yeah. What an adventure.
Like an Ace Reed cartoon, just it's just something else.
Oh my goodness, stole a horse. If that's going to lead to trouble, Shawn, that is just.
I know. I was glad I wasn't in on that deal. I was just watching.
Oh my, what a great conversation. You know what? I think we're going to end it here right now because I don't know how to top that, and it's been about an hour and 20 minutes. So what I want to do, if it's all right, Shawn, maybe have another conversation with you where we pick up where you are.
Sure.
You're riding in the PRCA at this point. Next question's going to be moving to the IPRA. How'd you find them?
Yep.
This has just been great, Shawn. I really, really, really appreciate this. Been a lot of fun today.
You bet. I'm glad you had me.
Okay, well, good. Excellent. Well, drive safe. Be careful.
Will do, for sure.
And to our listeners, we hope that you enjoyed our podcast, this conversation, as much as we enjoyed having it. If you do, please share it with your friends. Make your listening easier. You can find us on all the major streaming platforms right now. Search for Beyond the Chutes and follow us. And remember, check out the New York State Rodeo Museum Facebook group page and become a member. It was what started this podcast. And we'd like to say thank you to ParaSight Systems for their support with our podcast. ParaSight System is a push-button parasitic diagnostic system for your pasture animals, horses, cattle, goats, sheep, chickens, and for your companion animals, your dogs and your cats. You can find them at ParasightSystems.com. And remember, we have a coupon, BTC023, to get 50% off your specimen kits. Go online, use that coupon, get your kits coming, get your results, and let's go hunting for those parasites. And this is Beyond the Chutes with Shawn Miner today. Hope you had fun. This is Doug Simcox. Thank you for listening.